select audience. Some of them have travelled hundreds of miles. Some of them have just come round the corner, but some have travelled hundreds, sometimes thousands of miles, and they've come here to see one man, actor, director, producer, Robert Redford. He's looking trim. He's looking good. He's his coffee with him. Yeah, you should. Robert, good afternoon. You take a seat. Robert Redford, ladies and gentlemen, he is here. It's good to have you.
Well, it's considering that entrance, I'm happy to be here.
Well, it's great to have you on 5 Live, Robert. And although part of me feels as though we've come to you, really, even though you're in London, we're a part of your film festival.
Well, I hope so.
And one thing I just want to mention right at the beginning is, although you will have forgotten, I imagine, this is Mark here, and many years ago you wrote him.
Yeah, you wrote me a letter.
Thank you letter.
I do remember that.
I did a documentary for Radio 2 in which we did a long interview, which was very nice. Yeah. And afterwards, we had sent you a copy of it. As these things usually do, sending a copy of things, we'd never hear anything back. But you wrote back a very nice letter saying you enjoyed the thing, which I'm sure was contractual. But what you said, which I said, was how much you liked the medium of radio and how for you radio had always been significant and had been one of the most important forms. And that was the thing that I remembered from that. Do you still feel the same way?
Well,
now
it
that
depends
you're on
how
radio.
this goes. I do. I really do. I grew up with radio as a kid. It was during the Second World War, and that's all we had. It was before television. I don't mean to sound... I guess I'm sounding old by saying that, but I remember laying on the floor as a kid, and there was this console there with a green light that would dilate. And I was fascinated by the green light, and I would look at the green light, and I would listen to what was going on. And I remember hearing Franklin Roosevelt talking, and his voice, the rhythm and the tone of his voice was mesmerizing. Those are some of my early memories of radio. So, yeah, because with radio, you had to imagine things, and I love that.
And you've talked in the past where you would head to Hermosa Beach and you'd listen to the jocks of radio station KMPC.
Yeah.
And in the Bay Area, KPFA. They were the big kind of rock. Were they the rock and roll stations a bit later on when you were sort of taking a rest from school?
I took a lot of rest from school. Yeah, I think so. I think so.
They're the radio stations from the past. Anyway, listen, we're thrilled to have you on 5 Live, and we're thrilled to have Sundance in London. Just explain from your point of view, Robert, what the highlights are, the things that you definitely want to be a part of, and the things that you would like a broader audience to be aware of.
Well, I think that's it. What you just said is probably the main reason, because what's happened at Sundance is, obviously what it's about is creating opportunities for new voices to be seen or heard in independent film, because I think independent film, and it has the one thing that America is supposed to be known for, which is diversity. And with things getting more centralized, there's a risk that could be closed off. So we want to try to keep that alive. So that's how it all started, to support these artists, which led to the idea of the festival, because once they were being developed at Sundance, the new artists, there was no place for them to go. So the idea was to create a festival so there could at least maybe be created a community for these artists. And maybe somebody else would come. Anyway, that's how it started. Fortunately, after a few years, in the earlier years, there was no indication that we would succeed. Once it did succeed, then the idea was, how do we further the so-called mission for these artists, and which would include growing audiences for the artists? How can we expand that opportunity? So the idea was, could we ever go beyond the borders of Park City, Utah, and the mountains? It would depend on what the circumstances were. We would want to be invited first. I would not want to insinuate myself into another country without being invited. So that opportunity came up with you. And I was excited because Great Britain has such a rich cultural history. And I thought that's a really good place for us to be. And so when we got the invitation from AEG to come here, that seemed like a really good opportunity. So when we were told, please bring American films to London so we can see what you do, because our festival is international, and we've brought, in fact, the first festival film that we premiered was For Weddings and a Funeral. So we already had an established relationship with London. But this was going the reverse. I was being asked to come here. So it seemed like a great opportunity, and we'll see how it goes.
And some interesting guests being part of it, T-Bone Burnett. We should mention Paul Simon and His Royal Highness Prince Charles. Where does he fit in, Robert?
Where does he fit in?
Yeah. Well, apart from being heir to the throne, we know that.
Is he?
I was going to say he does have a day job, and so the way he fits in is that there's another part of my life that's more in the civic area, which is a commitment to environmental sustainability and, in some cases, preservation against the tide of what's going on, the power of corporations in the extraction industries to dig up the planet in sometimes, I think, unhealthy, unsafe ways. And I've been committed to that for about 40 years because I was aware that he was committed in the same way to the same things in his country. We had already kind of a parallel track of respect, I guess you would say. And so it came naturally that he's made this film that's pretty much along the lines of films that I've made in my country about our issues, which are the same. They are international issues. It just seemed like a good thing that us being invited here, if we could demonstrate some gesture of appreciation by showing something that has to do with our mutual interest would be a good idea, so that's why.
And the film is Harmony.
Is Harmony.
He's our Robert Redford, Prince Charles.
Is he?
Yeah, that's the way it fits in.
I'll bear that in mind. In terms of your own film work, I mean, obviously, a great career on screen, but equally impressive behind the camera as a director. And you once said that you had this long-standing feeling that the opening moments, the opening shots, the opening clause of a film should pretty much tell you what it is that you need to know about the way the drama is going to play out. Do you still feel that? Because at one point, you did a thing in which we looked at the opening of 5 of your films, and they were all doing that very compact thing about in the first 3 minutes, you'd have the issues of the film would be raised, maybe in a subtle way, but it would essentially tell you from the beginning of the film, this is what this film's about, this is what the story is, this is. Do you still feel that?
No.
Oh, bother.
No, I guess I do. I mean, I think that sounds great. I think the opening of a film should entice you to watch the rest of it. But it should also give a signal, you're right, about what's to come, but not tell the whole story. That's why I'm probably not a big fan of trailers, because sometimes trailers for films work so hard to entice you that they tell the whole story before you've seen the film. And they tell it in such a compact, exciting way that very often the film doesn't match the trailer. So I'm a little reluctant to get too much into that. But I do think when you open a film, there should be something of the essence of the film in a kind of, it's almost like an advertisement in a sense, but it has to be visual. So in that sense, I think you have that obligation.
And is it true, I mean, obviously you didn't direct it, but is it true that the opening explosion of the words on the page at the beginning of All the President's Men, I mean, the director of that film said that was actually your idea, the blank page, and then suddenly the typewriter striking. I said, what a brilliant idea. He said, yeah, that was one of Mr. Redford's, not mine.
I'll take credit for that. I'll tell you, I don't know how much time we have, but...
you have until 4 o'clock.
Do I? You see what I have here?
It's a glass of coffee.
This is to keep me from us being radio silent for a while. But what excited me about that was, how do you start that film? Well, we already knew we were going to start it with the typewriter, because the typewriter was one of the key elements in the film. Because for me, that was a film about hard work. It was about film about investigative journalism, and we had not seen that before. We'd seen journalism, but not investigative journalism. And the idea that I had was, don't tell the story that the country's going to know about, which would lead to Nixon's resignation. I didn't know that was going to happen at the time. Tell the story what people don't know about what people do not know. And that is what these guys did underneath the radar to get that story out. To me, it was about hard work. So there had to be something strong, and we knew we were going to start with the date of the break-in. But for me, well, how can you do that in a way that's really, really exciting, where you jolt the audience? Because on the outside of it, you would think, well, it's going to be boring. There's going to be typewriters. There's going to be telephones, and it may not be too exciting. So what I realized was that in most theaters, the curtain is always closed. And then people come back from the intermission, and then the lights go down, and the curtain opens, and there's the screen, and the movie begins. So I looked at that, and I thought, well, now, what if we have the curtains open? The audience is probably not going to notice that. The lights are up. The curtains are open. The audience comes in, and then the lights kind of go down, and they wait for something to start. Well, what if we had a certain amount of time that was actually running film on a white screen, and that film was the white paper that the typewriter key was going to hit? And then you wait until the audience gets nervous, which always happens. If something's not happening, somebody starts to clap, hey, come on, hey, what's fun? And they start to do that. And you wait for just that moment when the audience is really getting impatient, and then wham, you hit that typewriter key, because what's on the screen is not a blank screen. It's actually film that's running that's white. It's the paper. So I went, we did a preview. I got so excited because I counted at what point is the audience getting restless. It was 17 seconds. So I said, okay, we're going to have 17 seconds of film. So we did that, and when we opened, I was really excited because it worked like a charm, because when the typewriter hit, you could see heads bobbing up. Except the only problem with it, the theater owners didn't like it. So it only worked for a couple of times. And the theater owner says, well, hell with this. I'm not going to open the curtains and close the curtains. So that was the end of that.
We have a very cine literate audience here, Robert, and many of them, we were discussing this earlier, have actually been watching your films in preparation for coming to listen to you talk. And a number of them were watching All the President's Men last night, this week, and a number of them, and they will be embarrassed now, have confessed that they wanted to watch it more than once because it's quite baffling. It's quite difficult to follow on a first viewing. Do you think that's fair enough? And do you understand that?
No, I don't.
Okay, so throw him out. Find that guy and throw him out.
But maybe we should hear from the audience. No, it seemed to me, it's been a while since I've seen it. I mean, a long, long time. But it seems to me it was pretty clear about what was going on and so forth, but maybe not to an audience. I don't know.
You've said in the last few days that you think that was like a high watermark for the way we perceive journalism. Could you explain a little bit more about that?
Well, as I look at it in retrospect, I mean, at the time, I felt very fortunate. There's a story behind the story which we don't have time about how it came to be. But I was on a train promoting the film The Candidate, which I had made, and there was entertainment and news press on the train. And they were gossiping about the break-in that had happened 2 weeks before, and that the story about the break-in had come up and gone down real quick. So I was asking them, hey, whatever happened to that? And they gave me kind of a quizzical look like, and nobody's ever going to find out the truth, and blah, 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 blah. And I said, well, wait a minute, what's going on here? Are you suggesting that there's something going on that's not going to be printed? And they said, oh, yeah. And they said, both sides do it, it's dirty tricks. No one's going to be paying attention this summer. They're going to be watching to see whether Hank Aaron beats Babe Ruth's home run record. And no one wants to be on the wrong side of this man because he's going to win on a landslide. McGovern, who's the man running against him from the Democratic Party, is going to self-destruct. He's going to lose big time, and no one wants to be on the wrong side of this man because he has a switchblade sensibility. And that's what really galled me. And I said, so in other words, you're not going to do anything. You mean there's something going on that's not what we've read about? It's gone away, it's not going to come out? They said, no. So I watched the papers that summer like a hawk to find out if that cynical point of view was going to be true. And it seemed to be until I saw these little blurbs that came up, these two dual byline, and it was Woodward and Bernstein. Anyway, what that led to was when the thing exploded into a huge story, and then they were proved wrong in the very beginning. I saw a profile of who they were, and the chemistry of those two people, one guy was a Jew, the other guy was a WASP, one guy was a Republican, the other guy was a Democrat, a radical. They didn't like each other, but they had to work together. I thought, well, now that to me is really an interesting story. So I'd like to make a little movie about that, about their relationship. Well, the rest of the world doesn't know about that. So anyway, that's how it all started. So that story, that venture took 4 years to complete.
And are you returning to this story with a documentary?
Yeah, because now, at the time, I just felt very lucky to be, that the fact that I could step into an historical moment that saw journalism at its high point. I mean, it certainly felt like a high point to me at that time. I mean, everybody was grateful for what was done. And how many countries could you have people on the lower rung of the workforce, metropolitan reporters, digging hard to get the truth out that would bring the top nation's man down? I mean, that to me was really something. And it was all about journalism. So I felt gratified. So now, when you look back, you say, well, what's happened since that moment? So many changes have taken place, most of them driven by technology, the internet, so on and so forth. Things have changed drastically. The same weapons that were used then are no longer there. You don't have typewriters, you don't have pens and pencils, and you don't have dial telephones. It's all changed drastically, and journalism that used to have certain ethics, where you had to get someone to go, two sources to go on record before you could print something, that's gone. And as I saw all those things slipping away and journalism changing, I thought, well, that's interesting. Now, when we were approached by Discovery Channel, would you consider doing Watergate Revisited? I thought, yeah, I would. I don't know what it's going to say. It may say that that film, which represented that moment in time, is now a museum piece. It's gone. It's not there anymore and will never be. It's going to change to the point where that will just be seen as a relic. I don't know. We'll find out what happens as we explore it.
I wonder if some people in this country would say, you've got the Leveson inquiry going on at the moment, and the role of the Guardian newspaper in exposing the phone hacking story, and that's maybe journalism still working the way it's supposed to work.
Well, I'll tell you what, I've been watching.
That's fine.
You guys have something going?
No, he prods my knee every now and then to tell me I'm allowed to speak.
I was touching his knee to let him know that he...
But yes, we
I
do
don't
have
know what I walked
well.
into here.
It's a buddy thing we've got.
I have been watching this with fascination, and I'll tell you what my takeaway has been is that as I've watched in my country journalism being more hyperkinetic, more personality-driven, it's been interesting to watch that. People talk faster, they talk over each other, they interrupt each other. It's all about personality and so forth, and that's the way it is. When I was watching the Leveson, what I was impressed with was you could sense somebody's trying to kill somebody here, but it's all done with such grace and dignity. I mean, it's all done so smooth. The inquiry and the defense. I sat and I thought, this is really interesting. The difference between the two countries, at least from this example, I can't speak to anything else, but from this example, it's pretty impressive. I was very impressed by how it was being done.
Doesn't sound like a great movie, though.
No, it was kind of boring.
If I can change tack completely, one of the, in my opinion, the greatest novel ever written is The Great Gatsby. You starred, obviously, in the very famous adaptation from the 1970s. You know the film is being remade at the moment by Baz Luhrmann. Do you have any feelings or any particular memories about the successes or failures of that 1970s version of Gatsby, which became so epochal? I mean, we even had a pop group at number one called the Rubettes who dressed like Gatsby because that movie was such a big deal.
The Rubettes into
I'm not going to meet Robert Redford and not bring up the Rubettes. Have you heard of the Rubettes?
No.
Of course he hasn't heard of the Rubettes.
But
I'm so ashamed.
But that adaptation of Gatsby, which was very faithful to the novel, how do you feel about that film now? Do you think it stood the test of time?
I don't. I certainly respect doing it again. I mean, that's fine. When I think back on it, I think I was looking for something that maybe wasn't possible at the time.
Which
was to get inside the story of the book a little bit. Now, what was interesting about the book is that they kept Daisy and Gatsby at a distance from one another. And I think that was part of the power of the book. But I thought, well, if a film is just totally loyal to the book, then why make a film? Because the book was so great, mainly because of the descriptions and so on. But I felt that we might take a step further and get inside and have an intimate moment between he and Daisy that would reveal the same thing, but it would be more, there would be more texture to it. But no, the idea was to stay strictly to the book. So for me, the experience was really about costumes, and it was about the locations, and it was about set design and so forth, which I thought was exquisite, and the words of Fitzgerald. I had hoped for something that, now that I look back on it, probably wasn't a good idea.
So bearing that in mind, what would be your advice for Baz Luhrmann
doing it in 3D?
I would never give any advice to a fellow director. I think it's his choice, and he can do whatever he wants.
And are you wowed by the prospect of stereoscopy? Have you gone with the 3D revolution?
No, not entirely. No, not entirely. I saw, when I was a kid, my brother and I, we were 15, I think. We rented tuxedos and snuck into the first, in Hollywood, just for the fun of it. We wanted to see if we could sneak in to the premiere of the first 3D movie. It was called Bwana Devil.
Yeah. A lion in your lap, a lover in your arms. That's the tagline.
It's another knee-touching moment.
Okay. Well, we made it in, and we were all excited. It was a terrible movie, and I thought, geez, what, until that moment when a Zulu threw a spear right at the screen, and the audience went back. I said, well, that's the only moment in this whole experience. That's the only time I'd seen 3D until we showed Bono's documentary at Sundance, 3D, and it was quite impressive, quite effective. But I'm not sure, quite frankly, about 3D, whether it's not pushing too soon, too fast, and certain things aren't ready for it. I don't know that everything should be 3D. There's something about the focus and something about the naturalness of 185 settings.
It doesn't work. Nothing should be in 3D.
You're dealing with a fundamentalist here, who, just with a reference to all the president's men, his great regret is that he's becoming increasingly as though he looks like Richard Nixon, and because
when I was a kid,
when he was young,
when I was a kid, my dad sat me down in front of the television. He pointed to Nixon on the news and he said, "You see that? That's the devil." So I grew up thinking that was right. And now my great thing in life is I look like Richard Nixon.
Well, I don't think so.
Thank you very much.
I think you look like David Cameron.
Right, I'm off.
Put that on the trail.
No. But I'll tell you a story you might be interested in. When I was 13, I used to have a thing in America called Boys Week, and it lasted about 3 years, and it was a celebration of boys. And so during Boys Week, there was a ceremony for kids that had won athletic awards, and I was one of them. And so I was sitting in the audience, and the guys that were handing out the awards were Senator Nixon and Governor Earl Warren, who then became a Chief Justice. I didn't know who these guys were. I thought they looked boring, and they acted boring, and I just wasn't interested. I wanted my award. I wanted to get my ribbon and be gone. But you had to get on the stage, kind of like you do in a graduation ceremony, where you parade across, the guy hands you a diploma, shakes your hand, you go on your way. So I was waiting, and as I came across, I wasn't thinking about anything, and the guy who handed me the ribbon was Nixon. But I remember when he gave it to me, and he says, "And congratulations," and blah, 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 whatever he said. I thought, whew. I said, what a vibe this guy has. It's dark, and I don't like it. And it hit me so hard that there was something very artificial, but almost frighteningly dark about the man. And that's all I could take away. But that stayed with me much of my life, so that when he rose in politics, I carried that feeling with me, which I think a lot of Americans did. But that was my introduction to Nixon.
Hey, that's how would you describe that vibe again? Just
dark.
Dark.
Dark and artificial. I didn't believe there was something inauthentic as a human being.
Some questions here which have been arriving during the program. Now, that we had a very unsuccessful attempt at this question when John Cusack was on the show recently. It's a similar question from Philip Guest on Facebook. I'm planning a Redfordathon.
He said that?
Yeah, well, so we were having a Cusack-a-thon, and they wanted to know from John Cusack what movies of his he would recommend for a Cusack-a-thon to watch all the way through the night, 5 movies. So Philip wants to know, if he's having a Redford-a-thon, what movies that you have been responsible for, either acted in, produced or directed, would you suggest putting in?
Are you asking me?
Yes. Well, I'm not going to ask him.
I was curious about what he said.
No, he wants to know your choices.
Oh, he wants to know what my choice is?
Yes.
This theme never works, does it? This is the second time we've done this.
Well, I'm a little shy of that, if you want to know the truth. I'm a little shy about talking about things I've done. I think that's for other people.
We'll do it now.
Okay. Great Gatsby, I know you're slightly ambivalent about that. Ordinary People, Horse Whisperer, no?
Yeah.
Okay. Butch Cassidy.
Yeah, Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid.
And the other guy.
And The Sting.
Yes.
That's 5. That'll see him through the evening. There we go, fine. And you agree with them?
I do.
They were his choices. Thank you very much. Well done. That's how we do democracy here.
Okay, I'm going to try one more, and if the listeners' questions don't work any better than that one,
we're not doing
it's
any
the last one.
questions.
It'll be back to yours. Adam Morris saying, as director, do you find it harder to tell your own version of a story when the story is true?
Wow. What? Say that again?
Okay. Do you, as a director, find it harder to tell your own version in a film when the story is true?
No, not at all. I think, for a lot of people, truth is flexible. And you have your own, I look at something, I think we're all, any half-sane person is in search of the truth, which these days is getting harder and harder to find, but you're always searching for the truth. And maybe what's just beyond that is something even more vague, like the meaning of life and so forth. But you're always searching for the truth. But it's your own. In other words, for me, when I look at something, I've always been interested in American. I'm interested in my country and its history because there's been so much, particularly starting the Second World War, when you were growing up as a kid, you were given a lot of propaganda, a lot of red, white, and blue propaganda. This is good, you got to, and you went with it, and it was very powerful. So now, as you get older, you want to say, well, where's the truth in what stories we were told growing up as a kid about your own country? Because you're proud of your country, you love it, as I do, but you want to know what the truth is about your own country, just so you feel good about it. And so that's what's led me in film, is looking at the story beneath the story you think you know. That's what All the President's Men was about. And so you're really looking for your own truth in that, because the truth is sometimes given to you in a slogan. I was told as a kid, for example, because I was in sports, that was a way out of a tough neighborhood. And so I was told it doesn't matter whether you win or lose, but how you play the game. And I found out that was a lie. Everything mattered as to whether you won or not.
Robert, we are right out of time. We really appreciate Sundance coming to London. We hope it's the first of many.
Me too.
And thank you for your half hour with us
Thank
here
you.
on 5 Live. Ladies and gentlemen, Robert Redford. Thank you, Robert. Thanks very